Nai anam chindati shastrani. Nai anam chindati shastrani. Nai anam dahati pavaka. Nai anam dahati pavaka. Na che anam kledayanti apo. Na che anam kledayanti apo. Na shosati maruta. Na shoshati maruta. Shri Krishna is speaking here. Weapons do not cleave the self. Fire does not burn him, waters do not make him wet, nor does the wind make him dry. If you wish to define the soul, then this verse helps us. Weapons can cleave the body, but not the soul. Why? Because the soul is too small for this to happen. Logically, one can only cleave an object if there's enough area for it to go through. For example, if I have a piece of paper and I have scissors, then the scissors can cut through the paper, because the paper is spread out and has that area, the scissors can cut that paper into various fractions. But the soul is so small that even the blade of a weapon can't go through it. When we look at alternative definition, the soul is everywhere. For a weapon to go through an object, it needs a place to go through. But there's no place where the soul's not there. And therefore, there's no way that this weapon can go through the soul. So where can weapon go through? If a scissors cuts a piece of paper, then it's because there's spaces between the there's spaces between the pieces, which is the paper. But, so to cut the soul, you need that similar space. But only so that weapon can go through it and cut it apart. But it's not possible because the soul is omnipresent. You can either call the soul smaller than the smallest or larger than the largest. So whichever way you try to look at it, it's impossible for a weapon to cleave the soul. Fire is not able to burn the soul. What can fire burn? Fire can only burn matter and things that are objects. The soul is not a matter, nor is it an object, and so the soul can't be burnt. As an example, we have space, where there's no matter. Can fire burn space? No, it cannot. And if the fire goes into space, then it will run out, because it needs oxygen to run, and there's no matter in space. Therefore, something's not an object. Can fire burn it? Fire can only burn objects, and the soul is not an object. Therefore, fire cannot burn the soul. Using the same logic, water cannot make the soul wet, because the water can only make something wet if it can fall on it. But there's no such thing in the soul for it to fall on. The same way that water cannot make the soul wet, wind cannot make the soul dry. This is the wind can't make something go dry if it can't go inside that thing. And that's how small the soul is. On the side point, we definitely recognize our form, our body, but none of us recognize our souls. And the people that can only recognize their bodies and not their souls, the reason for this is because of the ego. Logic so far seems nice, it's good, we've learned to listen to Samkhya Yoga, but we only have an experience of this when we think that if the soul is as it is described in this verse, then why do I see myself as separate from this soul? This is because of the ego. Two people are the same, but they get separated from each other because of this ego. When this ego comes into picture, for example, this is me, this is you. That's what Dhritarashtra said in the first chapter. Between my sons and the sons of Pandu, this was the root of the Mahabharata, this mineness and thyness. And that's as a result of the ego. When a person achieves a level beyond the ego and becomes egoless, and then he can experience this immortality of the soul. And then, until then, spirituality is only just talk. It's just talk, and it's just words written down on a piece of paper. In reality, there's no such thing as the ego. It's only an illusion that we're all different from each other. When one can recognize this, then he can experience that immortality that Sri Krishna is talking about. And that soul is in each and every person. We're not bringing it somewhere from the outside, but it's always been inside the body. Some people never find this out because of the ego. And the reason why we all see different from each other is because of this ego. And there's this always continuous debate going on between spiritualities, whether we're all just one or we're all different from each other. Whenever Guruji gives discourses on the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, these questions come up. What is the soul really like? Is it the same as the Supreme Soul, which is Shri Krishna? Are all these souls different, or are they the same? And if we understand all these souls are the same, then why do these souls seem different? If my soul is different from yours, then all of our souls will be different. What is the truth? When we try to look at it, all souls are the same, but they all seem different from each other because of this ego that I mentioned. This whole room, let's say we're all in a house. The whole house is the same, but we all say, this is my room, this is your room, this is your room, this is the other person's room. But this doesn't affect the fact that the house is exactly the same. This is like saying that this is my air, this is your air, this is your air, this is the other person's air. The air never says this because it will always belong to everyone. It won't belong to one person or the other. It's the same thing whether I breathe it or you breathe it. The air is the same. And once the air enters into my body, does the air become mine? No, it doesn't. Because in the same way, the air isn't mine. All the souls are exactly the same like the air, but it's because of the ego that they seem different. The intelligent people among us ask, why didn't you talk about these different souls moving from one body to another? Our scriptures say that even when we're talking about different souls moving from one body to the other, then it's because of this ego. This ego causes that rebirth to take place, which we'll discuss later in detail. When this ego goes away, then there's no difference between the individual soul and the supreme soul. Only when we have different bodies and this ego do we think that we're different. We think that this is my soul, this is your soul. It's not like that. All the souls are exactly the same, and we'll go into that in detail. But as soon as we achieve union with Brahman, the Supreme Soul, then we see that there's no difference between the two. And this is a divine experience, and we need to reduce our ego. And this meditation we did is a springboard to achieving the soul. There's not a single person in history who did the Omkar meditation consistently has not attained the soul, hasn't attained the Supreme Soul. This is an experience, not words written down on a page in a book. And the Gita keeps discussing again and again about this ego and about the soul. Fire cannot burn the soul, but there's a fire that by the name of worry that burns us deep inside. Our scriptures say, Chinta, Chitta, Samanasti, Bindu, Matra, Visheshita. Meaning, worry is like a funeral fire. Who's heard of this before? This comparison. The symbol in Sanskrit between worry and funeral pyre are exactly the same. In fact, it said that worry is worse than a funeral pyre because a funeral pyre burns a dead body, whereas worry burns a person that's alive. It burns them deep inside. In fact, worry also burns our bodies after we die as well. Worry burns us deep inside. And a person who's free from their bodies can experience the immortality of the soul, can experience peace of mind. And when there's no worries left in us, then there's none of this fire burning deep inside. You may think that it's very easy for me to sit here and say, get rid of your worries. Well, how do you get rid of your worries? How do you achieve peace of mind? You saw in the invite, we said how Guruji's 8-step method on how to achieve peace of mind. Great personalities have shown us the way. First and foremost, the first way to achieve peace of mind is to forget. And only then will you be freed from worry. The more things you remember, then the more you will worry. The root reason why we worry is because we remember everything. For example, I raised my sister's son, I financed his education, I sent him abroad to America to study. He got married to a girl there and he didn't even tell me about it, didn't even invite me to the wedding. The older sister here is worried because she remembered all she did in the past for her nephew. She's completed her responsibilities, so she should forget them now. But it's because she's remembering them, all these worries and pains are coming to her. Forget about it and throw it down the well. Those who can forget can be freed from worries. Do you ever see a small child worrying? You ever see a small child worrying? You ever see a 2-year-old child putting its head in its hand like this, deep down in worry? Another word for child in Sanskrit is buklu, meaning one who forgets. A child always forgets. That's why a child never worries. You may observe when two children neighbors fight, and they start crying, they pull each other's hair, and they say, we're never going to talk to each other again. Then 10 minutes later, these children completely forget about it and start playing together again. they've forgotten in just 10 minutes. They start playing together. But on the other hand, if their parents, if their mother's gone into a fight, then that fight would go on for 10 years. They wouldn't speak to each other. That's the difference, because children forget, and their mothers never forget. And worries come to us because we just don't learn how to forget. So this is the first step on how to achieve peace of mind. Learn to forget. Jesus Christ was asked, who can enter into this kingdom of God of yours? Christ replied, those who can be childlike. Remember this? It's not childish, but childlike. Anyone can be childish. Even an 80-year-old person can be childish. But be a child like children are. They're innocent and they forget about things. They go back to the garden and forget about it. They don't not speak to each other for 10 years. That's why they're free from worry. What is worry? Great personalities have described a worry as a thought without action. A thought without action. When a thought is followed by an action, it's planning. We describe the reason for Arjun's despondency. If you worry about something you can fix, so let's say if I worry about the ceiling falling on my head, that's a worry, but it's not a despondency, because I can fix that problem. I can get architects, engineering to do it. But if I worry about the sky falling on my head, that's despondency. That's the difference, because you can't fix that problem. So I'm not saying no to planning, I'm saying no to worrying. A thought followed by an action is not a worry. Thought that's not followed by an action is worrying. Next, I've said the second way to be free from worry is to accept the reality and the facts. The majority of us cannot accept the reality and the facts, and that's why we worry. There's a true story of an incident that took place around 50 years ago. There's a woman, age of 34, that was living in the town. She had 3 children. Her husband suddenly died, and she became a widow at the age of 34 with 3 children. Her husband had died. For any woman in that situation, that would be like the sky falling on her head. What could she do? She had no education. She had no qualifications. Where could she go? Her husband was just an ordinary man. He had no kind of large bank balance to leave behind for her. All the savings that were there was lost in the medicine, in the treatment, in the operations to cure her husband's illness. So the people in the community told her that to go to these people, we have wealthy people, people in our community in Ahmedabad, in Kolkata, in India. Go to them and they'll give you some money. That should be enough, and it will last you your whole life. You haven't got a husband to look after you, haven't got a job, you haven't got qualifications, this will look after you. This woman decided, I'm not going to hold out my hand out and beg to anyone. That's what the first thing she decided, that I'm not going to beg to anyone. I'm going to take this offer up. Secondly, she accepted the fact that her husband had died, and however much she would have cried, would it bring her husband back? No. So she wondered what she would do. Guruji says that God always gives one person a talent that they can do better than everyone else, and that's coming up in Swadharma when we go into verse 31 to 54 in the second chapter. God gives every person one talent. This meditation, this process that we did with Omkar, is a process of unwrapping that gift that lies inside you. That gift that each and every person has that nobody else has in the world. This woman had a talent that she cooked delicious food. She lived in a small town, so she left that place and she moved to a big city nearby. She started a kitchen. It was like a restaurant service in a small building. I'm not talking about the new restaurants you see in the big cities. It was like a kitchen, a very, very small, derelict building. It's not a big hotel, but a place where people come in situations. For example, in India, if the spouse who does the cooking is out of town and they were at work, they had nobody to cook for them, they'd go to this restaurant and she would feed them. Eventually, the publicity and the fame of this restaurant grew so much that the spouses that didn't come before, who were out of town, started coming as well with their husbands or wives, because this food was so delicious. But she had to get vegetables from the market, she had to cook them, prepare them, she had to feed the guests, whatever, because her daughters were really young, so she had to look after her daughters as well. But eventually, her daughters grew up, her 3 daughters started helping her, and her customers kept growing. She saved her money, kept growing her business, kept investing in that business. Eventually, she started a tipping service. Before it was only a restaurant, eventually she started a tipping service. Her daughters got older, and she married each of them. She gave the daughters. She married the daughters in good families with a held up high, and she also gave her daughters some of her wealth. That woman is still here, and if any woman falls into that same situation she fell into, then she tells them to stand up. She tells them their story, her story, and she helps them. Not only that, her business has developed so much. She now sells the spices in the stores, and she now has servants and employees working at her restaurant. She's become so famous in Indian society now. All this took time. It took about 30 years to accomplish. Well, what if she gave up? What if she started crying and feeling sorry about herself 50 years ago? What if she complained about the situation of being alone with 3 children and no money, no education, no qualifications? She would have spent her entire life crying. Look at the difference in 30 years, how much it changed. Because she took actions. Not only that, because she took actions, she didn't have time to worry, and she completely changed the situation around. So the person who accepts their reality has no reason and no time to worry. Okay? That's accepting your circumstances. Thirdly, think of today. Live in today, and there'll be no worries. The great thinker Ruskin, who's heard of Ruskin? Ruskin, great thinker, Gandhi looked up to him. He read his materials. He kept a paperweight at his desk saying today. Somebody asked him why he had this, and he just replied, I live in today. There's no worries today. People either live in the past or the future, but there's no worries today, because today's the day where we can make our efforts. The person who's worried about the past or the future, he's wasting his time today and hindering himself in the future. If you're looking to London and talking to New York, you're not going to be able to see the thing in front of you. That's the difference. That's the state you put yourself in if you look at the past or the future. It's fair enough. You can learn from your experiences in the past. You can use them to help you in the present, and then you can shape your future in the correct way. And that's why you should live in today. Fourthly, manage your time and you won't be worried. The time is a tool that you have to use. People are worried because they're in a hurry and thinking that they haven't got enough time. What if they had planned in advance how the time would be allocated? If they did so, they would have no reason to worry. People worry when they're 60 because they felt that they didn't use their time properly in their lives. Our scriptures say, Dharmartha, Kama, Sama, Veva, Vidya. Means give your dharma, work, and your worldly enjoyments the same amount of priority. By worldly enjoyments, I mean everything else apart from dharma and your work. Okay, that could be like administration, you have to do everything else. Give it the same amount of priority. I'm going to put my hand up and say that this is what the scriptures say, and I'm myself learning to apply this in my life because of my work hours, I haven't been able to manage a complete equality, but I'm telling you what the scriptures say rather than what I've managed to achieve in my life. It says, if you have 24 hours a day, then you should give 6 hours to dharma, 6 hours to making money, and 6 hours to do whatever other business you have to do, and 6 hours to sleep. So in this way, your 24 hours will just go like that. A lot of worried faces, and I got worried as well when I heard this. If you do that, then you get peace in your life. Only 6 hours to earn money. 6 hours to earn money. Our employers put us on duty to work from 9 to 5. So we cannot work for only 6 hours. So we need 2 hours more. So where do we get these 2 hours from? Dharma. We cut those 2 hours out. But at the same time, because we need to get it from somewhere, out of those 24 hours, so we get it from dharma. Also, we can't sleep 2 hours less, as you said. I can't. I personally can't either. I can't either. So when we get it, we have to get it from our day as well, from 24 hours. Where do we get it from? Dharma again. So that's 2 hours more gone from dharma. So even the 6 hours of sleeping don't get properly. The doctor tells us we have to sleep a minimum of 7 to 8 hours, otherwise we get dark circles around our eyes. We wake up tired. So we need 8 hours, so we get those 2 hours from dharma as well. So even those 2 remaining hours in the day, there's no dharma. And as a result, we see what happens in our lives. We're worried and depressed for those 24 hours because that dharma gets cut out. It's because there's no proper time management. And we don't realize it at the beginning, but we realize it when we're 40, 50 or 60, and the depression that comes in. When we worry about it then, the situation is the same. There's not enough time left to do it. Compared to what I have now, compared to what I had then, I don't have enough time to live, and I've completely run out of time, and that leads to say that I'm trying to promote Dharma, but even if you want to earn wealth and possessions, you still need to allocate time to do it. Rather than worrying about whether or not you win the lottery, just allocate time to your work, allocate time to earning money. Whatever you want to achieve in life, you have to allocate your time to action to go towards achieving it. Otherwise you get worried because you didn't take enough action. So it's not just perspective of Dharma, it's perspective of whatever you want to achieve in life. Manage your time properly. Fifth, peace of mind comes from accepting the worst possible thing that can happen. When you begin a piece of work, then think about what the worst can happen and be prepared for this before starting your work. I'm not discouraging you, I'm preparing you. When a mountaineer is about to climb a mountain, he decides from the beginning he wants to reach the top. But he knows, he makes a decision from the bottom that he wants to reach the top. But he also has to accept it in his mind that he may fall while he's climbing, and he has to be ready from that. He knows that if he falls, his bones will break, he could die, but he has to be prepared for this, and then he begins. I'm not saying that he should start climbing with the fear of falling, but he has to climb accepting the fact that he may fall. In society today, people have developed weak minds because they're not prepared to accept the worst that can happen. From a young age, a child gets painted such a rosy picture that if you study, if you do this and that, it will be amazing when you grow up. So many amazing things will happen if you study hard at school. This is because, and then when the child, if it doesn't go the way the child wants it, then his whole life will turn upside down. This is because the picture that was painted for the child gets broken. So Sri Krishna understands this very well, and that's why he tells Arjuna later in this chapter in the Gita to fight. He says, Hatava prapasi swargam vitava mokshashe mahi, meaning the worst possible consequence of war. What is the worst possible consequence of war? You get killed. Exactly, you get killed and you go to heaven because he's doing his duty, his swadharma. And what's the best possible thing can happen? Shri Krishna says, Jivatma mokshashe mahi, meaning you win the war. Worst consequence, you'll get killed. Best consequence, you win the war. A person must be prepared. Okay? Sixth, confusion is the main cause of worry. Because the mind is confused, all these worries come one after another. A confused mind is the most worried mind of all. The majority of people keep bringing up worries in their minds and they do nothing else. There's a very nice story in Greek mythology, and this actually happened in the time of the Great Plague. But this particular story I'm saying is from Greek mythology. In this town in ancient Greece, there was a plague, and people kept falling to the deaths like dominoes. Thousands of people died. A saint at the time in ancient Greece went to the devil. In Greek mythology, their gods had different powers. If something good happened, then it would be the god that did it. And if something bad happened, they would allocate it to the devil. So the saint went to the devil and said that, why have you brought this plague when so many people are dying? Why have you done this to kill so many people? The devil said, I've got an order from my boss to kill 5,000 people and I can't do anything about it. The saint said 12,000 people have died. Why did this happen? You said 5,000, but why have 12,000 people died from the plague? The devil said 5,000 people have died from the plague and the rest died from the worry what would happen to them if they caught the plague. And this actually happened at the time of the Black Death. More people, they did medical records, more people actually died worrying about catching the plague than died from the actual plague itself. People book worries in advance, thinking about this might happen and this might happen. If someone in a social circle gets a heart attack, age 42, may find out 2 weeks later that his brother's friend, who was 42, also had a heart attack. Then a few days later, it's found out that a shopkeeper in the town, age 42, also had a heart attack. When 3 or 4 people hear this, then they worry if they're also 42 years of age. As soon as they get some pain, they start screaming, heart attack, and then an emergency ambulance gets called. The ambulance takes them to the hospital. They're kept for 2 days, and then doctor releases them saying nothing's happened, it's just a cold. These very people that came to the ambulance, hospital ambulance, goes home walking, just because of this worry. 7, a person who has a goal in a life never gets worried. You need to have a goal in life. For example, I want to achieve this. If you have this, then there'll be no time to worry. A weak person worries. You always have to keep your mind engaged in some constructive activity, because an empty mind is a devil's workshop. Very important to have discuss goal setting later on in the Geeta. Finally, in the 8 steps, those who have faith in God never get worried. One has to have faith in God. A small child crossing the road holding his mother's hands or her mother's hands has no worries because the mother's holding on to him. The mother's just watching the traffic and he just looks at the nice cars. He doesn't need to worry about these cars coming in that may cause an accident. His mother is looking after him. Just like that, a person who has faith in God never is worried because imagine God is holding his hand. The person who overcomes worries through these methods experiences this immortality of the soul, experiences this peace of mind. The rest of us just read this verse and we still have that flame that just burns us up. But the person who follows this 8-step method and follows that meditation, because they both go hand in hand, we reach that state when they escape from worries. So when we, Guruji described pleasures and pains are also waters that make us wet inside. Shri Krishna says that waters do not wet him. So when we get a flu, because of the waters of pleasure, God gives us the injection of sadness. Whenever we get the flu of the injection of sadness, God gives us flu of the waters of sadness. God, other way around as well. God gives us pleasure. So it works in both ways because they're both there to help us learn. Remember,